Hello everyone, GM. Welcome back to another episode of Overpriced JPEGs. It is time for your weekly interview, and boy, oh boy, am I excited for today's guest. Joining me on the show today is David Horvath, who, if you are a longtime or even recent listener of the show, you have probably heard me mention because I am kind of obsessed with David Horvath's Substack. David was the founder of UglyDolls, which is an incredibly popular toy back in the day, but still quite popular. There was later a movie made about UglyDolls, which we get into a little bit. He is also most recently the creator of Bossy Bears, which is the #1 show on Nick Jr. And I think he said the #4 show on Nickelodeon right now. So this is a man who knows how to build character IP and IP brands. And he has some really interesting thoughts about how that all connects with the NFT space, how projects are building in the space. In this episode, we talk about what he thinks various projects should be doing. One of the things he's done on his Substack is to write articles like if I controlled Moonbirds or if I controlled Doodles. So we get into that. I ask him, what should Doodles be doing? What should Moonbirds be doing? What should Pudgies be doing? And we have some fun back and forth there. We also talk a bit about Asia as something of a center for character brand culture. A lot of what David prescribes has to do with being in Korea or in Japan. So we get into that a little bit, which I think is really interesting coming off of the interview I did last week with Ray Chan, or 2 weeks ago. When was that interview? Whenever it was, when I interviewed a 9gag CEO, Ray Chan, because we also talked a little bit about the impact of being based in Hong Kong and building, being able to build for both like a Chinese or an Asian and American audience. So anyways, very interesting continuity there to some past episodes. Just so much wisdom here from David. So excited for you guys to hear it. And before we dive into it, a couple updates. I am fresh off. I'm glowing still from the Miami OPJ event that we held with Julian Hogwin. It was so much fun. I'm so incredibly grateful to everyone who turned out for that. And it has gotten me so excited for our next event, which is going to be at the end of this month in Austin during Consensus, April 28th. Tickets will be going on sale. I say on sale, but tickets will be opening up ticket redemption for that in probably a week and a half, 2 weeks. I still need confirmation that I can announce our guest for that, which will be hopefully coming soon. And then my last announcement is that we will be, we're very close to being able to actually ship and make an announcement about the Overpriced gin. There have been some holdups there. We were supposed to get those shipped out in March, but you need to get regulatory approval for all spirit brand labels, like you have to get the label itself approved before you can do anything. And ours was rejected twice on kind of small technicalities about like we had to phrase something with like wheat based, I don't know, whatever. There were like little technicalities that meant our spirit label had been rejected multiple times, but we finally got it approved. And so we are just about ready to bottle and ship the amazing Overpriced gin. So stay tuned for more updates on that. As always, go check out the Overpriced JPEGs Substack, link below, subscribe there. We have an awesome report coming out tomorrow, which will be the day you're listening to this. So today, about Porsche and Lamborghini and really comparing their two strategies to NFTs. They have taken, in some ways, opposite approaches to the NFT market. And I think it's really interesting to look at how they're each building and how they're each thinking about it. So a great report for y'all who are Overpriced JPEGs Pro subscribers over on the Substack. Okay, and with that, we are going to hear a word from our amazing sponsors and then my interview with David Horvath. I am so excited to announce that this year, Overpriced JPEGs has partnered with OPENSEA, the world's leading NFT marketplace, built for everyone, creators, collectors, noobs, and experts alike. I'm an OPENSEA user because they have the best selection of NFTs and a truly inclusive view of the ecosystem, supporting 8 chains and 8 global languages. I trust the systems they've put in place to keep the space safe, like copyright protection, malicious URL detection and removal, robust verification, and more. It's why they are the place to buy, sell, and create NFTs. That's right. You know OPENSEA, you use OPENSEA, but did you know that OPENSEA now has drops? New exclusive projects launch every week from top projects and creators, and you can check them out now using the link in the show notes. They also recently introduced self-serve drops, which is in beta, and allows creators to launch their projects right on OPENSEA. This drops product gives creators access to tools like rich storytelling drop pages, multi-chain support, and drop mechanic customization. The full launch for self-serve drops is coming this spring. So check out the upcoming drops on OPENSEA right now using the link in the show notes and own what moves you. You'll also be supporting the show in the process. Let me introduce you to a brand new company that I could not be more excited about, Web3 Sense. a Web3 analytics platform that combines on-chain data with social media insights to give you the deepest, most meaningful intelligence into any NFT community. I have tested other analytics platforms out there, but Web3 Sense has the most comprehensive capabilities I've seen in the NFT ecosystem. They apply sophisticated data science to wallet histories to determine behavioral patterns and help shape predictive analytics. In other words, they can tell you which Twitter accounts are actually the influencers in your space. And they can tell you what resonates most within a community by looking at what other communities token holders are involved in. The number of use cases here is virtually unlimited. So whether you're a trader, creator, institution, brand, agency, I promise Web3 Sense has data that you want to see with the deep and actionable insights that you need to build, analyze, grow, start, whatever you want to do within the NFT space and in terms of building a business and a community. Now, they are still in very early days, so they're eager to connect with the community. So if you're interested in learning more about what Web3 Sense can do for you and your business, and you should be, go and fill out the very short form linked to in the show notes, and someone from their team will reach out with more information and an opportunity for a product demo. Trust me, you won't regret it. David, welcome to Overpriced JPEGs.
How are you? Thank you so much for having me.
I am so excited to have you here. You are one of those people that I have now talked about many times, several times at least on the show. So it's so fun to actually have you here in person to do yourself better, more justice than I can when I'm trying to like paraphrase you on the pod.
Big fan, and thank you for the very kind words. I think on a few podcasts ago. So very excited to be here.
Absolutely. I'm excited for folks to really get a better sense of you and what you've done and your ideas. I think you're such an important and like helpful voice for this space in which, so many projects are trying our IP and our character IP and are trying to build toward being a character IP business, I guess. And that's really where your expertise lies. So I want to start just having you lay out a framework for us. I know you talk about there's two kinds of character brands. There's lifestyle character brands and there's story-driven character brands. Can you distinguish between those two for folks and also maybe talk about, you've described like there are pitfalls. A lot of businesses think this is obvious, but don't actually know which they're trying to be. So we'd love to just have you talk about this concept.
Sure, of course. There's story-driven, which within story-driven, there's many subcategories, which they're primarily broken up these days into children's publishing. So like Mo Willems and his Elephant and Piggy, or Pete the Cat, which is on Netflix, but existed already as a massive hit children's publishing program. Or if you go to Target and you go to the children's book area, Dogman, by the guy who did Captain Underpants, takes up just $1 billion worth of real estate, right? So these are major brands that are at mass market and at your local bookstore and in the top 10 on Amazon and in the children's book department. In some cases, just in the top 10, period. They are a absolute force that not many in our space, perhaps I've seen give much thought to, but it's still one of the greatest ways to sort of sneak into, mass market without completely destroying yourself.
When you say that, are you talking about like children's books, essentially?
Right. So children's publishing means everything from picture books for preschoolers all the way up to Wimpy Kid. If you ever seen The Diary of a Wimpy Kid.
Oh yeah. My brother, I had a little brother who was very into those books.
Sure. Yeah. So they all live in specialty and at the mass market at the same time, and they are kind of not really. There's a way that they've been able to not be damaged by being able to exist in both worlds. So there's story-driven children's publishing, and then there's story-driven animation, everything from Adventure Time and SpongeBob to Blue's Clues and Bluey, Peppa Pig, that sort of thing. And then motion picture, animated motion pictures or just movies, TV in general. And then gaming can sort of kind of crosses into the story-driven, here and there. But I kind of treat it on its own. The character business in regards to the video game arena requires a special approach, which is an entirely different. I can touch on it, but it's a long one. And then there's the lifestyle character brands, like Hello Kitty is the best example that everybody knows, or everyone thinks they know all about, right? But Hello Kitty is what automatically comes to mind. But there's many others like Moomin. Snoopy is actually mostly an adult character specialty lifestyle brand versus like many kids brands that we thought growing up were like, oh, the Snoopy Christmas special, and I had the tin lunchbox, but actually the primary, what drives that business really is adults through lifestyle.
That's really interesting. So are Hello Kitty and Snoopy the two big ones? And like, why did Snoopy start story driven and now you would describe it as lifestyle?
Yeah, so you can transition from story to lifestyle, and many have. Like Moomin, which was a Nordic brand that started as like kids comics and kids picture books and kids animated shows, but where the primary driver of most of the revenue, if you get down to how to approach it, is from, it's a lifestyle brand primarily in Japan and the surrounding territories. And that's where the bread and butter is. Same with Snoopy, right? And the idea that would be for children, when you even suggest that to the core fans there, they know it's from something. And in some cases, being from something from decades or even, a long time ago kind of helps with the air of history. It's more like it's a component of its history more than what it really is. But if you were to say Snoopy is for children, especially like the primary source of where all the fans actually are, would kind of look at you like, what world are you talking about? Confusing. And then there's kind of like a third category of characters that many get, when I say like, hey, you shouldn't go to mass right away with your brand new character brand that's less than 3 years old. And they'll say, well, what about, LOL Surprise, this character brand just went to Target and Walmart, and from day one, they appeared at Walmart and they've made billions of dollars. And my answer is, those are not really character brands. Like Barbie is not really a character brand, neither is even He-Man. These are toy lines that live or die through a combination of play patterns and design. Now they take on, they're like brand adjacent. There are He-Man t-shirts, He-Man movies. There are LOL Surprise there's LOL Surprise apparel. Like LOL Surprise is that big unboxing toy from NBA, right, for the last few years.
Folks who listen to this show might remember it as something we talked a lot about with the Cryptoys team, because the Cryptoys team, which is building on Flow, is building a product based on his kids' love of LOL Surprise. And so it's this like very toyetic unboxing experience.
Very good.
Where that's the focus.
Yeah, well, that sort of unboxing play pattern means literally the way that children physically interact with something, right? That's what drives most toys that suddenly appear. They seem to appear out of nowhere, and then some of them do phenomenally well. It's not the same as if I were to, if I had a Hello Kitty lifestyle brand, and then in year 2 I just decided to go straight to Walmart. There are many who will disagree with me, but for my own purposes and the way we've run everything, we view Target and Walmart and the mass market as wonderful places. We love going there and we do a lot of research there. But those are places to go when a good portion of their existing audience or their consumers already know you and then kind of are looking for you, right? Now, it's not really a great place to go get discovered. Whereas like MGA can go in with Lala Loopsy, and those dolls have a certain play pattern in combination with their design, right? And then I guess the force of their the advertising campaigns that they might run, so that there's some sort of repeat familiarity when kids walk in there.
Well, we're going to talk about this because I want to actually have you give your thoughts on a couple of particular NFT projects, some of which you've written about or, and given advice to in your writing. Pudgy Penguins will be one of them. I know you know Luca a bit, and Luca's obviously not that they're, well, have they announced a Walmart thing? Did Pudgy's just recently announce a Walmart thing?
I don't know.
Or am I making that up?
It's hard to say. In any case, I remember hearing it somewhere.
We'll go there in just a few minutes because I'm really excited to do this, like taking your wisdom and applying it to particular projects. Staying on this for a moment, though, your work talks a lot about this concept of evergreen ubiquity and how do you build a brand and a character brand that can really stand the ages. Hello Kitty being a great example of that. That was a thing when I was a kid. It's a thing now. It'll be a thing in 20 years, it appears, right?
Sure, of course.
And so when we distinguish between a story-driven brand, a lifestyle brand, and then this sort of play pattern thing, like something like an LOL Surprise doll, what is the life cycle of that? Like how long does that stay the top toy before it falls out of favor?
I always have to say that there's always going to be outliers in all categories, right? So the average is for a play pattern based toy brand, It's going to be either 7 years, much shorter, or it's going to be however long that they can keep that play pattern either evolving or interested through, it's not just play patterns, but also the design element, the thing that kind of like is the attractant that brings you across the room and makes you stop here instead of at the competitor. Like you'll have two competing toys that have very similar play patterns. One will win out through a combination of mostly design and it's, like what you're physically looking at and then how it feels in the hand. It's so many different variables in regards to the actual toy design element. But the design alone won't carry it for very long. The play pattern element has to be really clever and clear, and it has to kind of last the test of time. There's some that sort of just fade off and are replaced by others. But for toy lines, for toy-based toy brands, if they're successful, it's typically 7 years. Sometimes that can come from retailers. Some retailers have a built-in belief system that 7 years is the thing. So like in year 5, they're going to already kind of sort of get ready for your 6th and 7th year. It's a bizarre thing that happens even at the specialty level. Like mom and pop toy shops will start to move you around in the store. No, even if you're having your best year, they're still kind of anticipating that timeline. Or those who are aware of such a thing. Others will say, I've never heard of that in my life, and what is he talking about? So there's always outlier cases.
Well, and now looking at then like the lifestyle versus the story driven character brands, you say that it's important, or my sense from your work is that it's important to understand which you're building because you'll take very different approaches. And it seems like you feel like a lot of folks, and maybe in particular in the NFT space, have no idea which one they're trying to build. Why is it so important to understand it? Like, what are the different paths you take from one over the other?
Sure. Well, it's a very different audience, and the approach would be completely different. And there are some parts of the world that if you're not aware of what it is that you're building to begin with, you'll miss out on all the little funny components that you can activate to give yourself a better likelihood of success. Like lifestyle character goods, the audience is primarily older women, and there are certain places where you can go, like there are certain territories where you can grow things where there are terrific white spaces to have an impact on an entirely different, territory on the other side of the world. In fact, there are things that you can do in Korea that you're really doing for either Hong Kong or New York City that have very little to do with what is going on in Korea locally. And the more familiar those become with that sort of system and component, I think the more likely the long-term success.
So let's stay here. Let's drill down on this on the lifestyle side, and then we'll go into the story-driven side. Are there NFT projects that you think, in your view, should be going for a lifestyle brand, character brand path?
I think maybe almost all of them so far. Even the ones that
all of them should be lifestyle over story-driven.
Possibly, yeah. I have seen a couple that perhaps could be story-driven, but I feel like because of the built-in audience that you already have a much older like the fan base that already exists in a way might have some sort of expertise. Now, maybe there are some in the top 10 that I think if they were to go to a broadcaster, right, and they had a genuinely grounded, great story, then obviously right away. I have no real way of guessing. It's hard to say. That would all be so deeply internal as far as their ability to tell a really grounded story and have the characters be relatable. To go beyond just how cool the PFPs look, it's going to not really be based on the design much at all, and be more like how toys are kind of like design is important, but you have to have the play patterns with story-driven for media, especially like for animation and for television. You just need really relatable characters in truly interesting situations that are grounded, especially when you're going for kids TV. When you're going for like Rick and Morty, a little less grounded is probably the better route. But it's hard to guess really based on just seeing and just even the activity of the founders. It's not. I haven't really done a deep dive into each one where they have a very clear story, at least not yet.
Well, I'm going to ask you at the end of this, which projects you're most bullish on, if you'll indulge us in that. It might come through as we talk here, but I'd be interested in using Moonbirds as an example. You've written actually about what you think Moonbirds should do. So let's take Moonbirds as an example, because I think they're clearly not trying to be a story-driven brand. I think if we think about a UglyDolls or a Pudgy's, I think they both want to build lore and stories over time. So we can talk about them in that context. Let's think about something like a Moonbirds, which, as far as any of us know, are not trying to get a TV deal. Now, they're, of course, interesting because they have the CC0 component. And I'd be very curious to get your thoughts on how that affects this. But let's just take those characters for an example. So, and actually, you did this. You wrote a piece called If Ran Moonbirds.
Moonbirds were mine, right.
If Moonbirds were mine, which, again, they're CC0, so...
I guess they're everybody's.
Yeah. So talk about what you would do against this backdrop of you're talking about Korea and like the right places to be, and in the context of like a Moonbirds.
Of course. So something like Moonbirds, it's CC0 the way Dracula is also in the public domain. And what a lot of major companies have done is they've made their own rights protected version of Dracula, right? So they'll take the source material, like Hotel Transylvania, that animation from Sony, they have their own Dracula character, and all the other monsters. They're careful not to go near the Universal Frankenstein that like uses the bolts, and there are certain things that are like Universal has their Dracula, right? They have their and their version is also protected. That's uniquely theirs. Like Disney's Thor versus like the North, so I don't know. I might take if someone were to take the Moonbirds IP, but it's still in a state where it's not really widely known. I can take Dracula, knowing someone else can take Dracula, but I'm going to turn into my own Dracula. Whereas, we're all aware of what's going on, right? That, oh, this is Dracula through this filter. And, oh, yeah, I saw Bram Stoker's Dracula from Coppola, and I understand that that's his take on something that I just know. It's in my subconscious, and it's been with me, for my whole life, right? Dracula. So Moonbirds is not in that state. So a lot of these crypto NFT based projects are CC0, and they're like Nouns, where it can be built just by anybody, and so you get these little communities that develop. Whereas Nouns is more of a protocol with a character brand layer on the top of it to act as a sort of attractant to it. Moonbirds just went straight up CC0. So the hard part is if I make my own version, my own protected version, and I don't think I can call it Moonbirds, because even though the characters are CC0 or the artwork is in the public domain, the actual brand name and the logo is not. So I would have to come up with Dave's Moonbirds with a Z. I don't even know if that's probably too close. So right, it's tricky. I would have to rebrand it like the actual brand name. But then I would have to change the artwork enough where then it kind of I might as well just make up something new. So it's an interesting starting point. And in my letter, If Moonbirds Were Mine, I kind of suggested what I had laid out, because if you do that early enough, it gives the brand itself in its entirety a sort of base layer level of protection in culture in a way. We're doing something similar with Nouns now, where if you insert it into certain stores now, and it takes very minimal effort other than knowing what to do and having the time it takes or the patience rather, to kind of wait it out. And that's a big dynamic in this space in general, is the need for big things to happen. It's just about the worst thing you can do for any character brand at this stage, whether it's CC0 or not, whether you're story driven or not. A lot of the either kind of applause and cheering over big news and big things, while they're romantically wonderful, and I completely get it, right? In general, and there are outlier cases that will completely prove me wrong, right? And many who would disagree, but just in my experience growing what we've grown over the last couple decades, the big things in general are usually either hurtful, or sometimes, if you're lucky, they just won't make any impact at all. But they won't really help in general. There's always clever ways around it.
in the context of a Moonbirds, they signed with UTA. A number of these other projects have all signed with agencies.
Sure.
It's something you've talked about as like, I don't know and not to call out Moonbirds specifically. Again, this is sort of industry wide. There
Sure.
are a lot of projects that have signed with big talent agencies, and you've spoken about like how valuable or maybe not you think that is at this stage, or any sort of celebrity endorsement as like almost a death knell for a project. Or a sign that it'll have an early decline. Sorry, you can clarify or correct me here, but
Yes.
Why is that the case in your experience?
Now, short term, you're going to get a lot of attention, right? And in the short term, especially if the kind of like the less familiar you are with this, or at least maybe there are others who are in this and who would disagree, but in the short term, it'll feel like it's all working, right? You get a lot of celebrity attention, and it just the statistics and the metrics are all seemingly in your favor. But in general, when you're brand new and you're in your formative years, those are kind of like the most critical. It's like being a newborn baby, and those first few years kind of set the tone for everything else. That in culture, in general, people know when they're even mostly subconsciously, we know when we're being marketed to. And if the goal is just to go big, and who cares 7 years later, then it really doesn't matter. And that can be a totally fine choice also. It could be, look, we need to make an X amount of money, and we're just going to ramp it up and go for it. And we don't need to be around in 5 to 7 years. It's totally fine. My Substack specifically it is all focused on giving you the best possible chance, for the potential at reaching Evergreen Ubiquity, which is what Sanrio and Hello Kitty has. And even at that stage, you're still just as fragile. But it is possible to reach that sort of lasting forever and outlasting you level of success, if that's what people are after. And it's funny because I understand that celebrating the big stuff and the big attention. And not all celebrity attention is necessarily a bad thing, but in the very early stages, you just don't want culture to perceive what you're doing as marketing maneuvers. It's just something very different happens than if you're actually able to be a source of wonder and excitement, like to actually be discovered when someone discovers you in a place that they really resonate with. It's very different than just someone famous, telling wearing your shirt. It might have worked in the 80s and the 70s when that was new and you didn't just see it every 20 seconds. But a lot of these like big brand collaborations and things that, if I came up with something and suddenly I'm getting a call from a major sneaker corporation, that's a very romantic thing to happen to someone. It's like, this validates that I exist. Like, it's such a bizarre feeling. And it feels so huge. But these days, such collaborations are just an easy doom scroll, really. You're just used to it now. If this was like the early 90s and there hasn't been that many sneaker collaborations yet, it could be a big deal, right? And then when you're unknown and in your first year, you have to look at why would that big sneaker want to align with me in the first place? I understand if I'm out 10 years and I'm having a real impact on, a certain number of people, and it makes sense to have this sort of exchange. But if you're brand new, it's likely that you're having some sort of impact on a very small subculture, right? And they want to align with you because they need to show to their existing audience, their existing customers, that they're on top of being early that they're aware, So you probably popped up on a mood board somewhere that, hey, the cool kids in this sector in tech are aware of these 5 brands. So we got to seek out these guys because if they add all those up and they've got 50 of those going on at the same time, it, in their mind, perhaps keeps them sort of relevant so that they don't disappear into, because all brands are extremely fragile. And when you're at the top like that, the need to seek out the cool kids and to appeal to that base layer in culture is critical to then maintain selling those ugly white shoes at the closeout mall. So you got to pay the bills.
So let's say I'm sold, David. I want to take your advice. I want my best shot at Evergreen Ubiquity. you started to get at this when we were giving this Moonbirds example, but spell it out for folks who maybe haven't read your work. Your prescription is very like, you start with like 2 SKUs. You start very small in like 2 stores in Korea, and then you add 1 in Japan, and then you end up at the MoMA. I'm kind of right. I think that's, some of the details are probably wrong, but that's like your prescription. So tell us that and tell us why.
Sure. It's that, and then just time, really. So it's to be found in places that are meaningful to people already. So, like I love the MoMA store in Soho. My kids can't stand it there. But when I go in there, I feel differently than I do when I walk into Walmart or the neighborhood, like a Costco or something. And
it's curated. It's like very intentionally curated, which isn't to say that Target and Walmart aren't curated, but we all know the difference between a curation of a Walmart and the curation of the MoMA gift shop.
Oh, absolutely. When we first started UglyDoll 20 years ago, the very first shop to sell them was Giant Robot in Los Angeles on Sawtelle Boulevard. And this place had just opened like 22 years ago. And they were a store that was connected to the publishers of the magazine Giant Robot. So if you were a big fan of Giant Robot magazine 25 years ago, this was like a physical manifestation of the magazine as a store. And you walked in there, and they don't really sell that many, there's like 30 consumer products in there. But there's like a Takashi Murakami plush doll with like, you open it, there's a little watch in there. And then there's like the Yoshitomo Nara ceramic ashtrays and things. So, and then we were merchandise right in between those things. So you walk in there and you feel good about this place because you love the magazine. So you're already having something like a psychological reaction to it. And then you find, so it's about being found in certain places that are already meaningful to people. And then the power of juxtaposition and association. You're being found in these places that are meaningful to people. And so they assign that positive feeling to what they're discovering there. And discovering is a big part of it. It's not something that they've been, broadcast at. You haven't been broadcasting at anyone to go find, go down there and check us out. They have to be able to discover you in these places that they already care about. And then they kind of see you next to other things that they already have this sort of association with, and they kind of lump you into the same universe, right? So it's the 1-2 punch of being discovered in places of wonder and then being a source of surprise in places next to other things that are already, that kind of have a meaning assigned to them. And there are many places, especially we love, like when we launch something brand new, we'll always go to specialty in Japan. Many confuse Japan as being completely crowded in the character space, right? Because it seems like there's characters everywhere. Like as a tourist, when I remember getting off the plane, and like the bathroom had a character, and the toilet has its own character, and like everything, every little business seemed to have its own character. And I thought, wow, how are you supposed to stand out here? But if, and after when you live there, you kind of don't see any of that anymore. You walk outside in Shibuya in the big square with the screens, and it's just noise, and you kind of interpret it and block it out as such. But then there are certain places that the consumers do go where they have a very strong connection to that place, the way I have a connection to the MoMA. There are places that we call like the breaths of fresh air away from the noise of marketing. That I know these places are curated, carefully so. And so anything that I find there, I kind of assign either a level of curiosity or just the general feeling I have about that place. I'm already assigning it to this thing that I'm, finding. And I have to be interested in that thing, right? But it takes on a very different meaning to be found there versus thousands of something at a Walmart somewhere, which don't really carry meaning for anyone at all.
Asia features very prominently in the way you talk about curating this. I mean, even when you're talking about, you're I mean, obviously you're here talking about Japan here. You've mentioned Korea in the first shop where UglyDolls lived. You are mentioning, Murakami. So like, is that universally true that you feel like there's something unique about being in the right places within Asian culture that allows these things to permeate? Or does this happen to be the places you're familiar with and what you resonate with?
Sure. Well, I don't really have to go to Japan, Korea, or any of those territories to have a similar impact. I can, like for our stuff, we'll go over to like the Whitney Museum and make sure that we have stuff there. And then, we'll equally then on the West Coast try to be in the LACMA or MOCARs, any of these places that have a kind of like carry meaning for those who go there. And then
you're describing art museums.
Yeah, well, there are more museum gift shops than there are Starbucks and McDonald's combined. So it's kind of like
really
being able to go to Walmart without ever having to go there, right? And these places have such a meaning to them. Like even if you just go to
was that a joke or was that like an actual step?
Completely true. Yeah, it's completely true. The pain point is each one has its own buyer. So Walmart, you get one order, one buyer, 3,000 locations. But thousands more museum stores you're gonna have to track down reorders from each one. So that is a point of pain. But you don't have to really get into more than maybe 5 or 6 before then you can go down to the museum shows. The museum store buyers at the museum shows. If you're in the MoMA and if you're in the the Whitney or if you're at the Guggenheim at the gift shops, they want in on that. Like that's their kind of like the model, their go-to that they look at, right? They know, well, if you're there, then I got. I'm the buyer from the Bruce Museum in Greenwich, Connecticut, and I love what's in the MoMA. I'm like that too, so I got to have that.
Y'all know I love Ledger, the world leader in critical digital asset security. When you own crypto, what you actually own is a private key that gives you access to your coins. It is imperative that you keep this key safe, and Ledger wallets are the best way to do that. The Nano S Plus and Nano X Ledger wallets, paired with the Ledger Live app, give you the best way to start your crypto journey while maintaining full control over your digital assets. Send and sign your NFT transactions with full transparency in the Ledger Live app. What you see is what you sign. And y'all have heard me talk about Ledger Stacks before. Well, due to unprecedented demand, Ledger has received all the Ledger Stacks pre-orders that it can fulfill through summer 2023. And so they have decided to pause the pre-orders. Ledger is incredibly grateful for the community's support and is working hard to get current pre-orders out and ready to ship so that they can make even more Ledger Stacks to keep your digital assets secure. Sign up for the Ledger Stacks waitlist and be the first to know when Ledger Stacks are available again for pre-orders. But don't leave your digital assets susceptible to breach or hack in the meantime. Order your Nano S Plus or Nano X today by visiting shop.ledger.com or clicking the link in the show notes. So you were in Giant Robot, which sounds like that was the right fit and a great launch point for UglyDolls. You're now describing getting in museums. Like, everything's easier said than done. How do you do that? What are these places looking for?
Sure, of course. The very first one was really just walking in. I had walked into that store. They had just opened 3 weeks before we started selling there. And I was a big fan of the magazine, so I just went to go check it out on opening day and started talking to the owner. And then when we had the very first Ugly Doll prototype, I brought it into him. I brought it into the store to show to him. And it was actually not supposed to be a consumer product. The way Ugly Doll started was my wife and I had this dream to do exactly this for years, since we first met. And then she had to go back to Korea right after 9/11, and then her student visa expired. So I wrote a letter to her, like, we'll figure out, this is like dial-up days. So there was not like this sort of online chat communication was not as easy. We had AOL texting on American Online. So I wrote a letter like, we'll figure out how to do this somehow, and then I sent it to her. And I signed it with a little character at the bottom. This guy right here.
For folks who are listening on the pod, we're looking at the very first Ugly Doll drawing, I'm assuming.
Yeah,
well, we're looking at a very early Ugly Doll that stemmed from this drawing that I believe you're describing now.
That's right. So like the New York Times always gets it wrong. They say that then from that point she sewed this character into a doll. But that's like saying like, oh, well, he just made an Eames chair. Like, she turned it into a plush doll of a design and nature and feel that I'd never seen ever really done. I took it to friends of mine who were top designers at Mattel, and they were just like, where in the world did you get this? This thing is, plush is such a very difficult business, and it's difficult to come up with something truly new. And my now wife, Sun Min, just nailed it. So she sold a few of these things. I showed it to Eric out of excitement that she sent it to me as a gift, right? And he said, yeah, cool, man, I'll take 20 of those. So, okay, yes, that's why I'm here, to sell these to you, so I'll be right back. And then I called her up and I said, thank you for sewing this for me, and then I need 20 more, like as fast as you can. But luckily, she was into it, and I would drop off 20 of them; they'd be gone in one day. Drop off 40 of them; they'd be gone in 2 days. And tried a few more stores. Like there's one shop that was called Zaka in New York City on Grand Street. It was kind of like a similar vibe. It was like a character book design bookstore, and all same thing. They just sold out immediately. So that's the other thing is like when you have your stuff at museum stores, you can't just place them in cool areas. They actually have to do phenomenally well. So that's the other part of it.
Yeah, it's all more complicated once you dig a little deeper. So like for example,
cool shops and you're off to the races.
I'm going to keep using Moonbirds because I think Moonbirds to me feels like again, they're clearly not trying to be story driven. And they're art, right? Their whole brand is about art. So like the art museum tie-ins, like when I look at the landscape of call them quote unquote PFPs, like they have an interesting fit with like art, culture, not trying to be a story brand, want to be something else. So like, would the next step for them would be to make a plush, make a product, not but like one, and what would be the thing that could allow them to differentiate?
Of course.
That they could maybe get into one of these cool spots.
So the biggest mistake I've seen some make is they make what we call plushies. Plushie indicates that you kind of sent your drawing off to like a manufacturer and they just translated it.
Like stuffed it with
stuffed animal. Yeah.
Yeah.
And those are okay, but there's a big difference between that and coming up with something that's truly like a great consumer product executed as a plush, doll. So getting someone to really come up with a terrific prototype or something that a factory can emulate and they can replicate is really, really critical. I would immediately call at minimum like the Otis School of Design in Los Angeles, who does they have an entire toy program there. Try to negotiate maybe with some students to get a prototype made, all the way to seeking out professionals in the industry who do prototyping for Hasbro and Mattel. It's really important that it's not just a plushie of the character, but that the thing itself is so unbelievably irresistible that people would have a hard time putting it down.
What makes it, like, what was so distinct about the UglyDolls that was so, because like, somebody who's not in this world, I'm like, I don't know, it's soft on the outside and then it's got some squishiness in the middle and I can give it a hug. Like, I'm so, help me understand.
Sure. Plush in general is very difficult. The play pattern for plush is hugging them and displaying them, really. So it is very tricky, and it's very easy for plush to just get overlooked. So hers they were sort of like these, they were interpretation of 2D drawings, and the plush themselves were quite flat. They were a little bit understuffed, so very floppy. The fabric that she chose, which is sort of based on fleece, we since got a factory in Korea that now we just have a factory, and it's like the plush. I think we're the only ones who make that exact specific material. I've never found anyone else sort of, but it's kind of like fleece, I guess you could say. So a combination of the feel, like if you close your eyes and just hold it, it has to really feel great. And I think that's what many are missing when they execute, plush. And study what Hello Kitty, what Sanrio does. Sanrio's not a toy company, but I think it's like 50% of all revenues come from Hello Kitty plush dolls. And so that they're treating those things beyond just making stuffed animals of their character. So if it's not going to be something floppy and wonderful to hold, I would take a really close look and even buy like 10 and really pick apart. And like the Hello Kitty plush dolls made by Kid Robot and how wildly different they are than the ones that are made in-house by Sanrio. And get familiar with the major differences between the two of them. And the spatial relationships between the eyes and the head and all these things that really matter, so that, those plush dolls by Sanrio are a connection point between people and everything that their brand means and stands for. Or that you might feel about it. So it's kind of like the most important thing that they make. So I would go dissect that.
What are other products? It feels to me like if you're going the lifestyle brand route, a plush, and obviously you just described to us that there's so much nuance to that, is maybe the most straightforward or standard way to go in terms of the first thing you develop, in the way that if you're building a story-driven brand, a book is maybe the place to start.
Sure.
maybe more obviously than any number of other things you could start with, right? A card game, or a Transformer toy, right? Transformer started as a toy and then became a story, right?
Of course.
Is that true to say that Plush is the typical anchor point for a lifestyle brand, or are there other things like could they do a pillow? Would it be a lunchbox? Like, is there something else, Moonbirds or Nouns or Doodles or any of these if they decided to go the lifestyle route?
You may end up the lifestyle route. You may, like Gloomy Bear is a good example. You might end up selling way more Gloomy Bear bags and wallets and keychains and things that are not really toyetic. But the first thing they did, and I think they really did it right, was they got the plush doll perfectly, because the plush doll is sort of like the physical manifestation of your brand, right? That, like, a plastic figure wouldn't really, for some reason, doesn't quite resonate the same way. Plastic figures resonate big time with lifestyle, and not every brand needs a plush doll at all. Like, if Cause did a lot of great work in plastics, the graffiti artist with the 2 XIs, right? But for lifestyle, for that customer, if you're going up against Sanrio and Sanex and Rilakuma and Gloomy Bear and Snoopy, I would recommend starting with a plush doll, but have a plan to then follow up with some bags and things that you can immediately make the connection, like, oh, this is the character, and then this is how it works in my daily life, right? Things that are like accessories and things that just people use that they actually use. So if you launched a plush doll alone, it might be a little tricky. But if you had that as a sort of attractant, and then, oh, I got to have they might not even buy the plush. So it could end up being 5% of what you physically make. But it's the thing that gets you across the room that you stop and take a look. And then, oh, but I got to have this bag and wallet or the phone case.
Do you think NFT brands or any NFT brands that exist now can do this? Or is it just directly at odds with having to build in public and have an audience of people who are sitting there going, when token, when money, when the next thing? Because what you're describing takes a lot of patience, and actually, to the point we started this whole thing with, requires like turning down things that seem immediately flashy and starting very intentionally and subtly.
Sure. Yeah.
Which subtlety is not really like what NFT communities do.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. The need or desire to see big things happening can. Yeah, that's something that I think for everyone to succeed, that maybe we should move away from a little bit. But on the other hand, it kind of might not matter, because it's not really going to, like, if once you enter the marketplace, I think it depends. Like some holders really want everything to kind of feed back to some sort of value for them. Your question, I would say, the top 10 on OpenSea and the bottom 3,000 are sort of on equal footing. And
in terms of their ability to execute something like this.
Yeah.
Or in terms of, not like you're not evaluating the teams, but in terms of like the top 10 don't have more of an advantage than the bottom 3,000 in your view from just like
within
the core
confines
fundamentals
of the NFT world, for sure. Yeah, that there's clearly those that are far ahead as far as attention and interest and just awareness. But like I have a friend from Korea who was, I think, literally in the bottom 30,000 or so. And during the course of the 2 years when many of the top 10 projects are still trying to figure out, what the game plan, and he's already at every Mitsuya store in the country selling.
What project is this?
He's got a little guy, and I don't quite remember the Korean name of it, but it's from his NFT collection. And, he only had a couple thousand people maybe even visit the collection, but he's already gone forward with the steps that I'm talking about, where he's now just out there in public in these places that mean something to people. Like Mitsuya, at least in where our office is in Texas, it's a very small town. And so Mitsuya kind of means something to the people who live here, because all we have really is Walmarts and Targets and maybe Barnes and Noble is like as close as you get to a cool shop, because they have some Totoro stuff there. But so the Mitsuya is kind of like, that's our giant robot in this, in middle of America. And they can't keep them in stock. They sell out like crazy. And he's being very careful about placing them in very specific places and being real slow about it. It's been 2 years. The line for him at the Taipei Toy Festival in Taiwan is like it looks like it's San Diego Comic-Con, and it's just for the line for this one kid. It's absolutely
What's the name of the NFT collection?
Well, the artist's name is 2 Ounce, TOZ, and I can send you a link later.
Yeah, we'll link to it. I mean, I don't want to ruin. Again, this is sort of my question. Like, does it ruin it the second a bunch of NFT degens are like out screaming about the thing?
No, I don't think so, because I don't think the customer over there at Mitsuo who's fallen in love with his work knows or can hear them. So it's okay.
So maybe this is the core question. I guess, like, I understand, obviously, these things can exist in parallel. You can build a cool story brand and you can go do your thing slowly but surely. And you can have issued some you can have minted some on the blockchain, right? Like, obviously that can happen. Or you could have even started as something on the blockchain and then build it into something else. But this dream that somehow, or this dream that you can buy into this thing and then it can go and become really successful and you as the holder reap rewards. The question I guess is, do you buy that dynamic can exist? I think the answer is like, of course, yes. To your point, there's always outliers. This is, an NFT
totally.
can be cool the way a lunchbox can be, but like, how regularly do you see it happening? Do you think there's hope for some of the top projects?
Oh, sure. I would say that there will always be outlier cases, and being in the top on OpenSea is already a major outlier situation anyway. So I wouldn't say that it's not possible. Like we have 30 NFTs of Bossy Bear that we minted years ago. We're now the #1 show on Nick Jr. and I think we're #4 on Nickelodeon. There's no like, the price hasn't gone up. I don't even think most people in the NFT world know that these collectors have those 30 something Bossy Bear NFTs. Like you said before, the news about signing these big agents. I've been with CAA for years and they're geniuses and they're wonderful, but they're not, I don't really see the connection between signing with them and any sort of rate of success that collectors or those who are collecting the crypto art components would really be interested. I actually found the news confusing. The first time I think it was Crypto Punks announced that they're with
there's CAA.
One of those. And I just thought the announcement was so bizarre. Like, it didn't make sense. This is great, because you definitely want them in your, you want them there so that years later, when it is the right time, you don't have to look, you don't have to start looking for them then. So it's a good thing to have. And I automatically assumed, well, that's what this is. It has to be.
Do you think that's true, though? Like, it's not hard to, if the agents want you now, they're sure as hell going to want you in 3 years when you're that much bigger. Like, it's not like it's that hard to find them later.
Well, in general, it's really hard to find them. So I think the one super positive thing that happened through the NFT spaces was it got a lot of attention, and it caught the attention of these big agencies. And I'm sure for some that are going to become, or that are chasing the game, especially in gaming, maybe there's some component there where they know that they've got to apply a certain amount of money, and maybe having those big Hollywood agents will help them with the game component, or at least getting the word out. Even that, I just struggle with what, in the short term, what that could really do. It's just, they're great to have when you do get a show, right? Let's say you get a development deal, right? You've met with a development executive at one of the major broadcasters, and they're interested. Having an agent there will make a major difference for you in regards to what sort of deal you might be able to put together, right? Yeah, or if you have an amazing level of success, at that point they'd be able to start packaging future projects for you. So, but
if you've had an amazing level of success, they'll want, you'll be able to get them. We don't have to harp too much. I guess I'm just like, I don't know how much. I think your point is really interesting, and I'm sort of in the camp of like, how much you're gonna like sit and do nothing with them for 3 years so that you can have them 3 years. But maybe that's good. I want to actually jump, because in the spirit of time, and talk a little bit more about the story-driven path, which is connected to this, and in some ways connected to talking about agents and a development deal. I feel like I have a good sense of, if I wanted to build a lifestyle brand or a lifestyle character brand, right? Like, what some of the steps I would take. if you want to go down the story-driven path, what does that look like? And let's use Doodles as an example, as I think an example of a project, or a Pudgy's that definitely does want to do stories.
Of course. So you could do it all on your own. Like the guys who did Peppa Pig, they made the fortune that they did because I believe they were a struggling animation studio at the time. And then they just went ahead and made it on their own. If you look at the Odds One Out, the YouTuber who did his own animations, and now he has a licensing deal with Random House for books, and there's toys at Target, and he can go to Target because a percentage of the audience is well aware of who he is, right? I'm sure 10% of the kids who shop at the Target near our office here in the middle of farmland, Texas, they're well aware of Odds One Out. So when they go there, they go, oh my God, and like they're surprised to find it and they know exactly what it is, right? So there's already a connection and it makes sense to go there. If you want to do a deal with Illumination or for movies or Cartoon Network or Nickelodeon for shows, the general rule is the more you pay for it to be made, the more you get to hold on to it. The wonderful way around that for those who are not really funded and are just individuals is to start with a publishing program. Like if you have a book, or if you have, like for Ugly Doll, it was Plush Dolls. But if you have like a children's book, it doesn't have to be in the top 10 on Amazon, but if you have a series of books or some sort of publishing program that already exists, it's a lot easier to kind of use that as leverage and to negotiate. Otherwise, if you're just walking in cold to a major broadcaster with a great idea, or if you have some cool NFTs that have been selling really well, they're mostly going to want to own the entire thing, and then you'll just be paid to work on your own show. And then you might, if it's a SpongeBob level of success, you might see something in regards to consumer products, etc.
So if we take a Doodles, for example, who has a deal with Pharrell for music, they obviously have a whole world of NFTs and Doodles too, and the digital wearables. They do these really awesome activations that are, I don't know if you went to their South by Southwest activation or have been to any of them, but these immersive experiences. Mm-hmm. And then they just acquired Golden Wolf, this animation studio, to do content. What would be your recommendation in terms of where to focus if you have one?
Yeah, they seem to be on their way. I mean, if they acquired an animation studio, it indicates to me that they intend to produce everything on their own. So really, they just need a broadcaster, right? And then are they going to take it to YouTube and just play for free? And then that creates a wider connection to it, where then you can go to a certain level of mass market over time. And like Odds One Out was just a YouTube channel, right? Ryan's Toys review was that the parents just filmed their little kid from the age of 2. And now he gets more end cap space at Target and Walmart than most major brands. I mean, he has a far greater level of awareness and, most importantly, connection with the audience who lives out here than most, these brands that show up with a major motion picture or television shows. So if Doodles is able to create compelling animation that's relatable or just that connects with people, then you don't really have to spend the time it takes. Then I wouldn't really go the lifestyle route and spend the years, building that. You still have to be careful with how you manage it, and if it appears on too much too soon, it can sort of wear its welcome. But right, if they have their own studio, then it seems like they're well on their way.
And then let's talk about a Pudgy's, for example, because I mentioned, I think you and Luca have spoken before. They're in some ways breaking all your rules. Luca's been really straightforward about, hey, I paid a couple $1 million for this brand.
Sure.
It didn't have any revenue. To do anything, to please the holders, to be able to get anything done, I needed to have a revenue model. What he knows how to do is social media targeting and really pushing toys in retail through his social media prowess. And so that's the route they're taking. But he seems to be aware that can only take him so far. And so while they do that and develop that and, get Pudgy's everywhere on, Kellogg's cereal boxes and whatever else, they want to work on creating story and lore so that they can have a longer life cycle.
Sure, of course. What
do you think of this? Are they doomed?
No, my advice would be you are headed to Walmart and Target to make sure that by the time you get there, a significant portion of the people who shop there are well aware of what you are. And if they are discovering you for the first time, to have some sort of play pattern, right? Like LOL Surprise or Bratz, didn't really need to create any sort of social media, any campaign, anything, right? There's TV advertising to kind of support you being there in a critical first and second weekend. But if he's able to come up with some sort of equivalent of a play pattern for, we don't know if he's going to be in the kid aisle next to, Real Fur by Hasbro, or is he going to the cool action figure kind of pop culture area behind video games at Target, right? So we don't know where he'll first appear, but so that the person going there either immediately recognizes you, or there's something going on there that it presents some sort of play pattern where they wouldn't be able to put it down.
And the risk to not doing that is you don't sell, and then you don't have another then your brand is sort of dead because you don't get a second opportunity. Is that the risk?
There was there's a company, Spin Master, brilliant people who work at Spin Master. It's a toy company that started maybe 25 or 30 years ago, selling really cool airplanes they were importing from Japan, toy airplanes that they imported from Japan, and they took off like crazy. It turned them into a major powerhouse. I think they co-own Paw Patrol and what's that other spinning sort of like Yu-Gi-Oh competitor. They're just incredible. So they knew that we had a movie coming out in 2018 based on our brand UglyDoll. So they found sort of like a similar product to have ready at mass, so that when our movie came out, I guess the idea might have been to sort of kind of catch that. So they came out with something that was very kind of similar-ish as UglyDoll. I can't remember what the name. It was something that had the word ugly in the title of it.
Oh wow, subtle. Yeah.
So they went to Walmart and Target with it, and they had a major campaign. I don't know if it was all bots, but they did very well on social media. And so they certainly broadcasted out to people that they existed, right? But right away I thought, this is going to do incredibly well for 2 weeks, and then it's going to disappear. And in my opinion, it was because that people were finding out about it through marketing, and that just hits a different part of the brain than if you discover something and fall in love with it. That's why Hello Kitty is Hello Kitty.
And so this is your point, because I think, I mentioned you to Luca during that episode, and I brought you up to give him the opportunity to do what I just did to you, right? Which is like, I want you to evaluate what Pudgy is doing. And I asked him, like, what do you make of like a David Horvath's thesis around being very intentional about what stores you get into, and how intentional are y'all being, et cetera, et cetera. And I think you commented, we clipped that and put it on social media, and you commented to mention that, oh gosh, what is the name of the gel blasters?
Right.
He had a lot of success with something like a gel blaster
totally.
in Walmart. And you were like, that's a perfect example because that's a play pattern thing. So that wasn't about having to know the character. Your whole point is like, if it's a character that doesn't have to do with play pattern, if you're being marketed about it, it hits a different part of the brain than if you feel like you've just discovered it and it's cool and you feel like you're choosing it, not that somebody's telling you to choose it. Like
right.
There's a coerciveness you feel when something has been marketed to you. The exception being if it's something that has a really cool novel play thing, or just a play thing, it doesn't have to be novel, but that you love, then it doesn't matter, right? Because you like the thing.
Sure, exactly. Like
that makes sense.
We were saying before that when you're Hello Kitty, you're not in the business of getting everybody's attention or awareness. You're in the business of getting people to fall in love and then to stay in that state for as much as possible. And, it goes in a wave. But if I were to go to Walmart with Bossy Bear, even after all the books we've sold, and it's been our best-selling toy line it's been our best-selling plastic toy for like 17 years or so.
Wait, Bossy Bear?
Yeah, Bossy Bear is...
Bossy Bear's been around for 17 years?
Yeah, it was a children's book series with Disney we did in 2007. Is that 17 years? I lost track. Either way, it feels like a long time. And then right away...
This is why we all need to be so patient. This shit takes so much time.
Oh, yeah. So we launched these toys in 2007, and we put them only in museum stores and specialty. If I were to go to Walmart with that, even with the big launch of the kids' books, even with pretty okay sales of the books, I definitely wouldn't. It would not be on Nickelodeon right now, and it would definitely not be the #1 show on Nick Jr. right now. No way. It would not. We would have made a lot of money for a couple of years, but it would not still exist. Right.
What I see behind you they look like figurines. They don't look like they're plush.
Yeah.
Did you start with figurines? That was an example of a toy brand you began that were plastic or?
We used the hype of the designer toy craze that started in like 2000, 1999, and really was, that's what propelled Funko, right? To like everyone knows Funko Pops, but that originated from what Bounty Hunter was doing in Japan in the late 90s. That's what propelled Cause to do what he was able to do. So we went in there was a time when there were thousands of specialty stores specializing in kind of like high retail price, high quality designer toys, they called them. And so Bossy Bear sort of thrived in that world. But they were in mom and pop shops, and they were in thousands of museum stores and specialty, all here in the U.S. and then Canada, South America. It would be huge in Singapore, just Korea especially. But if I were to just go to Walmart with these, they look cool, and maybe you saw the kids book, they might even do okay. There might be a blip where it's doing just fine, but it wouldn't. That wasn't the path we wanted to take. We really were interested in Bossy Bear lasting for decades, right? And not just lasting, but thriving. And it's just a very different approach. And it's not something you have to do, right? Also Luca is Luca. And I think that many times it comes down to the person behind it. And he's going to find a way to be the outlier, right? Regardless.
Always.
But in general, for advice for those in general who are thinking of, going to a Walmart with their idea, or really, putting 4 house payments down on a project that, also it's not just about the founder, it's about the collectors who are very, very much invested in these things. And they get so excited when you hear that these big things are happening. Someone like Luke, I would say, okay, well, I believe that he'll find a way for it to work in a way that maybe no one's, he's going to create a path that no one's really traveled before.
That's another question I have, and I only want to ask a few more because I want to be mindful of our time, but how much do you feel like what you've learned in your decades doing this is like, it falls in the category of some things never change, humans are humans, and so what you're saying will always be true to an extent? And how much do you feel like the world is changing and like, and so what you're saying may apply less moving forward than it has in the past? Yeah.
So I put that to a test every couple of years or so. We'll launch something using that same system. The most recent one was Bossy Bear. During COVID, we were not able to really go anywhere, but we knew that the Ugly Doll movie was going to do really bad. It was a great project when we were with Robert Rodriguez. And then as soon as the news that Alibaba was coming on, I just had a gut feeling that we better do something else that is with like really great, talented people in the animation or in just in the industry in general. So in early 2018, we made new Bossy Bear toys, and we brought them to the Taipei Toy Festival. And then we plugged Bossy Bear into that same system that we've been using for all of our other brands in Japan. And in Japan to have impact in the States and also in other parts of the surrounding territories. And sure enough, we created enough of the blip that we needed to have, kind of like in sub-pop culture, so that we could go to Ron Howard at Imagine and say, here's what Bossy Bear's, where Bossy Bear is living right now. Here's the stories we would love to tell. And here's where Bossy Bear originally came from. And it sort of created this whole narrative where I think that had we not done groundwork. Yeah.
So why is Asia the center for this? And that's a long-ended, open-ended question for something that I'm trying to wrap, and I have 2 important questions to end on. But like, yeah, why is Japan like the soft power and Korea the soft power when it comes to character IP?
Sure. Well, if you look at Pop Mart, used the exact same system that I'm talking about. Pop Mart didn't exist 5 years ago, and a year ago they did 2 times Mattel's market cap. Right, Mattel, like the entire company, and they only have a couple lines. So they utilize this major force of taking your time and going specialty and knowing what specialty to go to, staying the right small. This is not about hiding in the corner somewhere and just keeping it real and keeping it small on purpose for the sake of being small, but being the right kind of small and to make a genuine connection with people versus marketing to them, like to become one with culture instead of advertising to it. So I think analyze Pop Mart above all else, because like everyone in NFTs should analyze what Pop Mart has done and not what they're doing right now. I think looking at what anyone's doing right now from Pop Mart to Hello Kitty can be tricky because you see Hello Kitty at H&M and think, yo, we have to be in H&M. But we didn't really pay attention to what Hello Kitty did from 1974 to 94, where she didn't go anywhere near anything like that. I think the first brand collaboration was in the 21st year or something. And it didn't just happen randomly. There was a lot of work that had to happen in culture, and there were a lot of waves that had to be, connections that had to be made. Like in the early 90s, if you went into a mall in Los Angeles and you saw a Sanrio store, it meant you were in a bad mall. They had a lot of waves to ride and a lot of groundwork to lay so that they could do H&M now, and it would have no ill impact at all. It wouldn't be a negative. It's a positive because you're making a connection with H&M's tribes, and then you're reinforcing H&M into the tribes of those who are aligned with Hello Kitty. Brand collaborations are all about bringing tribes together and then having them resonate with each other, right? And with each other's tribe leaders. So I think too many out there who are really seriously invested just look at big names and it's romantic because it's attention from, I'm into Crazy Turtle 2000 and I can't believe Nike knows that Crazy Turtle 2000 NFTs exist. This is huge. It feels huge because you've known Nike since you were 2 years old. And it's just this weird connection that you're early on something that now, Time Magazine knows what we're doing here. It feels amazing. But feeling great about something and it having a genuine impact or trying to avoid a negative impact where you're now on this kind of like short-term cycle to being synonymous with marketing noise. It's the worst thing you could do. So the system still works for us. Others out there, I'm convinced, will come up with an even better system. But as much as times change, they kind of also, stay the same.
You wrote a really interesting piece about Nouns, and one of the things that comes through in your piece about Nouns is you're obviously a big Nouns fan, and you really want it to succeed because you feel like the ecosystem you're in, the character brand ecosystem, is broken, and that there's something about Nouns that could help make for a healthier character brand industry landscape.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So explain that. Explain that.
Well, I think that the whole NFT character space in general is pretty healthy, especially when things were shaking everybody up in early to mid 2001, where it was just big news that this even existed. Nouns is interesting because it's a character brand on the surface, but it's this protocol. Really, most of it is this protocol where you buy a noun and that buys a vote for projects that are submitted to Nouns, and then all of the funding goes into this big pot that are used to fund the ideas. And that's a very interesting new take on just trying, like on character brands in general. I'm surprised that more have not sort of adapted that exact system. Like, well, here's my new character, and all the money's going to go into this pot, and whoever owns this character is going to vote on any ideas that are submitted. That was pretty brilliant. But I feel like the character space that we've been in for the last 2 decades, and we have enormous love for, is a lot of it works perfectly fine. I think preschool is still wonderful. It works better now than it has in a very long time. But the idea that you can just release a show and then sell tons of toys and shirts and stuff, that's not entirely true anymore. It's kind of true, but it's not what it used to be. There's no such thing as even hit movies that everyone goes to see. You can have the number one, like Avatar, the original one, biggest movie in history, right? The toys by Mattel were the worst performing it's like the worst performing toy line in toy history for like that decade, right? Whereas like Cars just did okay, actually. Like Pixar Cars, now we all know, like when it first came out, it's okay. Just in the die-cast cars by Mattel, they made billions for like unbelievable.
Why? Why did Avatar toys do so poorly?
But for Cars, you mean?
No, why did Avatar toys do so poorly? Like, I'm fascinated by that dynamic, but I'm more curious why Avatar toys did terribly. Just
in general, like there've been, I don't want to name too many because I'm technically a competitor, and I'm so paranoid of getting in trouble. But there are many major brands that have put out big movies between that first Avatar and just recently, where the movie's well received and it does really well, and they make a fortune at the box office. But the toys and the apparel, it's just, the connection is not automatic anymore. Something has happened, like you said. Times change. Times have definitely changed for in that way. Whereas in preschool, it's actually solidified, where it's like if you have a big preschool show, then there really is somehow greater success in the consumer product side. I think it has to do with just the connection. Like Star Wars sold a lot of toys, not because everyone went to go see Star Wars, it's because Kenner activated incredible play patterns where it was vehicle play, little guys that stick into the actual vehicles that you saw in the movie and you can run around the house with them, right? And then do kids really do that anymore versus how much time is spent, on iPads? Although video games have always been a go-to kind of that the toy industry loves to blame. I remember like in the 90s saying, oh, well, the toy industry is going down because of, Super Nintendo. And then the toy industry just roars back to life. But it's just not an automatic given. So I like Nouns. Nouns is sort of like the Uber to, if that industry of mine for, going back 20 years is like an old taxi cab. It just presents a potential alternate path and a different approach. So I like the character component, that sort of top layer where that's what brings you over, right? Oh, these are cool. What are these, right? Just the thing you're seeing, the glasses being like their equivalent of the Nike swoosh, or, the characters themselves being the sort of thing that gets most people to look. But then as you look deeper, it's quite interesting what's happening with the community, and how it's growing is so just the opposite of how it's been done traditionally. That I'm just really curious as to what the outcome is going to be and how far they're going to push it.
When you and I spoke last, I think you described that a lot of folks in your industry, and call it the entertainment industry, tend to think of NFTs as like a line of merchandise. I've talked about this quite a bit with John Rogers, who's been on the show many times. We're recording this like a day after news came out that Disney's actually like sunsetted their metaverse, their next gen storytelling team, which we'll be talking about that on the show because we've got lots of thoughts on that, mostly from John Rogers. But a lot of these studios feel like they've treated NFTs as a line of merch. How do you think they should think about NFTs? So that's question number one. And then the closing question is, are there any NFT projects that you're really in particular excited about? Nouns, obviously, of course, is one, but are there others you want to shout out that you think are particularly interesting?
Sure, of course. So a lot of people I speak to, like at the big studios who are in the licensing departments, right? They were, what the heck is this thing that David's telling us about? Oh, you got to see, this is the next big thing. And then as soon as they kind of understood it as, oh, this is a product category, like, master toy license or bedding or soft lines, or then it kind of made sense to them, and they were happy that they could treat it as a product category. And then there were companies like Recur or, a lot of these Polygon-based companies that presented them with deals that were very familiar and didn't feel, oh, this is going to just be an extra category for us, like, apparel or lunchboxes. So I think that's how they digested it, right? And you saw a lot of the major brands sort of put out their own NFT collectibles, and they thought, oh, these kids are, the kids of the future will be downloading collectibles instead of buying toys. Like Vivi had rotating 3D scans of actual action figures, or felt like you had a virtual action figure collection. And many, including myself, were under the impression that someone out there is creating this decentralized metaverse, and that this is something that's coming. And that's where the CC0 thing was interesting to us, because it made sense that if it's decentralized and rights protection is necessary, but a sort of the act of saying no, that CC0 based properties will rise to the top because there are no limits in a decentralized metaverse. And then it felt like, well, Zuckerberg's making like the decentralized, like company-owned version, or maybe Apple will have the glasses that, it's like iMessage, but out here, right? So everyone thought that everyone's building these things. And I think everyone else thought that everyone else is building these things. And so far, I don't think there's, at least for the decentralized one, I don't think there is one just yet. So I think they realized that no one's, like, these are not things that they have to have ready right away. And that was not what was happening, at least in the short term, right? So I think things cooled. I don't think it cooled in relation to Bitcoin's price or the market or anything like this. It was more the realization that these things are not actually...
The tech isn't ready. Like the consumer experience isn't ready. And that's what you're describing. John talks about integrating both blockchain and NFTs just earlier in the development ideation process, and that there's interesting ways, like instead of just like at the end, okay, you now have like a TV show. Now when you're putting out the t-shirt, you also put out an NFT. Like think about a blockchain strategy earlier, which I think is still a little bit, isn't fully fleshed out. You kind of need people who are in this day in and day out to think about how they would integrate an NFT and a blockchain strategy into a particular creative project. Sure. Out the gate, we need people actually doing that thinking to spell it out. But what do you think of that?
I think that's interesting. I think it's wise to look at it in a different way other than just this is an extra thing I need to have in my program. Although I will say that perhaps some project founders might also, in the reverse of that, want to start thinking of their collection as a product category. Many of them might have the potential, to succeed and go toe to toe with Hello Kitty, or with SpongeBob, right, on the broadcast side. And it might take some sort of leap where, well, then, as this technology evolves, we will grow with it and we'll drive that growth. But also we have the potential to thrive and exist, in Hello Kitty's realm, on her turf. And that, it would be interesting to see if any are able to break away and not infuriate, holders who are feeling like, well, you've just gone off and now you're doing it. But at the same time, they're all celebrating the attention from the potential of being able to do that. So it's a tricky back and forth. It's very interesting. I'm more excited by the art side of it, where digital artists can now feel like they're offering original works of art for the first time. Like there's no, my wife is a brilliant painter, and we get invited to these group shows at galleries all the time. And she hangs her wonderful canvases, and I kind of have to settle for a print of my work because I work digitally. And now, we can make available original digital art, which I don't hear a lot of that. And I feel like that is like, as that would be great for the arts, there must be other components of this technology that we'll uncover and discover and be able to embrace, and hopefully it keeps growing.
Awesome. Last question, the NFT projects you're excited about.
Oh, I love a lot of the what has been born through Nouns, right? The derivatives. Some of them have been pretty interesting. There's one that's a combination of Nouns and then Gremlin's Toads.
Yes. Right.
There's a couple of them. There's the Nodes, which is heavy on the Gremlin's Toad side, and then there's the Bonies, who took the skeletal head of the Gremlin's Toads, but then uses a skeleton version of the Nouns body. So the two concepts are sort of flipped. And I just thought that was fascinating that those were allowed to grow and to do what they did without any concern about getting a legal letter from Nouns. That Nouns encourages that sort of use is very, very interesting to me. and it is a complete 180 from the world that I've come from. So those I gravitate towards.
I love it. David, thank you so much. I really appreciate you coming on.
Thank you for having me.
We're going to have a new piece of writing of yours in the newsletter, in the Overpriced JPEGs newsletter. Go subscribe to the Overpriced JPEGs newsletter so you can hear more from David. He's a phenomenal writer and obviously a just brilliant person to speak about all this with. So thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for watching this episode of Overpriced JPEGs. If you liked this conversation, if you liked this episode, please go ahead and hit subscribe. It helps me out, it helps the show out, and it means you will get alerts and updates when we post new content. Thanks again.